If you've ever stormed out of your house in anger, you might want to listen to this story until the end, because some people leave home just to cool off and come back a few hours later. Others leave and wish they never had. This is the story of an 18-year-old who only wanted to prove a point to his parents. One night, that's all he planned. But that night turned into something else entirely. Something followed him. Or maybe it was already waiting. He swears that what happened wasn't a dream, wasn't a misunderstanding, and definitely wasn't his imagination. Even now, years later, he avoids talking about it after dark. So if you're alone right now, maybe turn on a light, because after this story, every little sound outside your room might feel a lot less normal. This story was shared by someone who asked to stay anonymous for reasons that will make sense very soon. I was 18 at the time, and nowhere near mature enough to handle my own emotions. At home, even the smallest disagreements would explode into full-blown arguments. Doors slamming, voices raised, dramatic ultimatums that was normal for me. But that day, it went further than usual. What started as another pointless fight somehow escalated until my parents finally snapped. Fine. If you're that unhappy, just leave. They probably didn't mean it literally, but I took it that way. Fueled by anger and stubborn pride, I walked out, determined not to come back. Not tonight. Maybe not for a few days. Honestly, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I wasn't making a plan. I was just upset, and too immature to admit it. So I wandered through town with nowhere to go, kicking pebbles across the sidewalk, replaying the argument in my head and convincing myself I was in the right. Eventually, the anger faded, and reality set in. The sun had disappeared. Streetlights flickered on one by one, and the temperature dropped just enough to remind me that I wasn't dressed for a long night outside. I needed somewhere to sleep. I had friends, sure. Plenty of them would have let me crash on their couch without hesitation. But I also knew their parents would call mine the second they found out. And the last thing I wanted was to crawl back home looking defeated. So I decided to avoid all of that. Looking back now, that decision might have been the worst mistake of my life. The first place that came to mind was an old abandoned house on the edge of town. It had been empty for as long as I could remember. When I was younger, my friends and I had explored it a few times, stupid kid stuff, daring each other to go inside. During the day, it never felt truly haunted, just forgotten. So I figured it would be perfect. Hidden. Quiet. No parents. No questions. Even if I didn't sleep, I could at least wait out the night. The house sat at the end of a normal suburban street, except the road suddenly stopped. Years ago, the city had blocked it off and marked it as a dead end. Beyond that sign, the pavement gave way to a cracked, overgrown driveway that disappeared into thick trees. That driveway led to the house. I got there around 10 p.m. The moment I stepped past the barricade, everything felt different. The street noise vanished behind me like someone had closed a door. All I could hear now was the rustling of leaves and the faint crunch of gravel under my shoes. Technically, I was trespassing, so I kept checking over my shoulder the whole way, making sure no one had followed me. No passing headlights, no neighbors watching from windows. Once I slipped through the rusted gate and onto the property, I knew I was completely hidden. Trees surrounded the place on all sides. Bushes had grown wild and thick, swallowing the yard whole. The house itself was almost invisible until I was right in front of it, like the forest had been slowly devouring it for years. Up close, it looked exactly how I remembered. Just worse. Paint peeled away in long strips. Windows were boarded shut, with weathered wood. And the broken front door, the same one we used as kids, still hung crooked on its hinges, barely attached. It was like no one had touched the place in a decade. I stepped inside. Instant regret. During the day, it had felt like an empty building. At night, it felt like something else entirely. The darkness wasn't normal darkness. It was thick, heavy, swallowing the beam of my phone flashlight after just a few feet. Every boarded window meant no moonlight, no streetlights, nothing. Just black. Dust covered everything. The air smelled stale, damp, almost rotten, like the house had been sealed shut with whatever memories were left inside. Right then, I knew one thing for sure. There was no way I was actually sleeping here, But I didn't leave. Something about the place pulled at my curiosity. Maybe boredom, maybe adrenaline, maybe something I couldn't explain. So I kept walking deeper into the house, scanning the rooms, shining my light into corners, half expecting to find graffiti, old furniture, anything interesting. Elle didn't know what I was looking for exactly, just something to break the silence. I had no idea that the house was about to give me far more than I wanted. I had only been inside for a few minutes. I reached the staircase and had just started climbing when the sound came from below, a slow, deliberate creak. Not the random settling noise of an old house, not the wind, footsteps. I froze mid-step, one foot hanging in the air, heart instantly slamming against my ribs. Another creak. Someone was walking on the floor I had just been standing on. Then after a long, suffocating pause, I heard a door open near the front of the house, close to the exact door I had entered through. A cold wave ran through my entire body. Whoever was down there was now between me and the only exit. I stood perfectly still on the stairs, afraid even the sound of my breathing might give me away. My mind raced, searching for explanations. Maybe it was another kid sneaking in. Maybe a homeless person lived here. Maybe they hadn't noticed me at all. I waited, hoping I'd hear footsteps again, hear them move into another room, anything that would give me a chance to slip out. But nothing happened. No footsteps, no shifting, no breathing, just silence. And somehow, that silence felt worse than any noise. It was the kind of silence that feels intentional, like someone is standing perfectly still on purpose. Like they're listening, like they know you're there. Minutes dragged by 5, maybe 10, though it felt much longer. My legs started to ache from standing frozen, and doubt began creeping in. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the door swung open on its own. Maybe there was no one here at all. But one thing was certain, I couldn't stay there all night. Even if someone was down there, I'd just have to run past them and bolt out the door. Slowly, carefully, I stepped down the stairs, placing each foot as gently as possible to avoid making noise. The old wood groaned anyway, loud in the dead quiet. At the bottom, I leaned forward and peeked around the corner into the hallway. Empty. My pulse pounded in my ears as I moved to the next corner, the one that gave a clear view of the front door. And that's when I saw him. A man stood directly in the doorway, not moving, not searching, just standing there, already staring straight at me. It was like he had been waiting for me to look. Before I could even react, before I could run, speak, or breathe, he called out sharply, "Stop, don't move." His voice cut through the darkness like a blade. In the dim light, I could make out his silhouette. He wasn't dressed like a trespasser or a squatter. He was wearing a uniform. And in that instant, my brain snapped to a single conclusion. A police officer. "You shouldn't be here, kid. What are you doing out this late?" His voice was deep, but something about it felt wrong. Thick, sluggish, like his words were dragging through mud before reaching me. I swallowed hard and forced out a shaky reply. "Sorry, I'll leave. I didn't mean to be here." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he just stood there, completely still, as if weighing my words, deciding something. Then he took one slow step forward. "Did you come here alone?" The way he asked that question sent a cold spike straight down my spine. It wasn't casual. It wasn't concerned. It sounded interested. As he moved closer, the faint light from my phone revealed more of his uniform, and that's when I realized something was off. It didn't fit him. The fabric hung loose, wrinkled, almost sagging off his frame, like it belonged to someone bigger, or like it had been taken from someone else. He was tall but unnaturally thin, his limbs long in a way that didn't look healthy. And no matter how close he got, I still couldn't clearly see his face. Shadows swallowed it whole. Eyes, expression, features nothing. Just darkness, where a face should be. "I asked you something," he said, voice suddenly sharper. "Answer me." My throat felt tight, like it was closing. "Yeah, I'm alone." He stepped closer again. "And what exactly were you looking for out here?" I shook my head, barely able to speak. I don't know." For a moment, there was silence. Then I saw movement in the darkness where his face should have been. A subtle shift. The outline of his cheeks lifting. I think he smiled. Without another word, he turned away from me and walked toward a doorway on the side of the house, the one he must have come from. The room beyond it was completely pitch black, not dim, not shadowy, just pure darkness, like the light refused to enter. He stopped at the threshold and leaned casually against the frame, one hand braced above his head. Then he spoke again. "Come here." His tone had changed. It was almost friendly, almost reassuring, but underneath it was something else, something cold, something hungry. Every instinct in my body screamed not to move. So I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the dark doorway and the silhouette of the man waiting inside it. He straightened up, pushing the door wider open behind him. "Come here," he repeated, this time firmer, colder. Every instinct I had was screaming now. That man wasn't a cop, not a real one. And as he stepped aside near that pitch-black room, I noticed something else, something that sent a surge of adrenaline through my body. He wasn't blocking the front door anymore. He was only a few feet away from it. But there was a clear path. I didn't think. I didn't speak. Elle ran, full speed, straight at the exit. For a split second, I thought I might actually make it. Then his arm shot out. His hand clamped onto the back of my collar, jerking me violently backward. The fabric tightened around my throat, cutting off my air. I felt myself choking, my feet stumbling as panic exploded inside my chest. But my shirt slipped. The grip loosened just enough. Maybe the old fabric stretched. Maybe my momentum was too strong and I tore free. I didn't look back. I ran out of the house, down the overgrown driveway, through the trees, across the blocked road, not stopping for anything. Branches whipped my face. Gravel slipped under my shoes. My lungs burned like they were on fire. Still, I kept running. Across town, through empty streets, all the way home. When I finally reached my house, gasping for breath, there was a police car sitting in the driveway, lights off, engine idling. My parents had reported me missing. Apparently, after dark came and none of my friends had seen me, they panicked and called the police. 2 officers were inside talking to them when I stumbled through the door. I should have told them everything, about the house, about the man, about the uniform. But I couldn't. I was still in shock, still shaking, still half convinced that if I spoke about it, it might somehow make it real. And part of me was terrified of getting in trouble for breaking into the house, or worse, admitting I had just run from someone who looked like a police officer. So I said nothing. The officers asked if I was okay. I nodded, said I just needed air, that I'd been walking around to cool off, and then they left. What truly disturbed me later was what they didn't ask. Neither of them mentioned the abandoned house. Neither asked where I had been specifically. Neither said anything about another officer in the area. If the man I encountered had been real police, there would have been radio calls, descriptions, questions. There was nothing, which meant one thing. Whoever or whatever I met in that house was not a cop. I fully admit I put myself in danger that night. I was a reckless, angry teenager, trying to prove a point. But even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me in that place. Something that wanted me to walk into that room. Because if I had believed him, if I had obeyed, if I had stepped into that darkness instead of running, I don't think I would have made it out. For most of my life, nearly 20 years, I lived in a tiny countryside town where nothing ever happened. No crime, no excitement, no stories worth telling. Just endless fields, quiet roads, and the kind of silence that makes time feel slower. As a kid, it was painfully boring. So when summer break came around and I was 17, maybe 18, boredom turned into curiosity, and curiosity turned into a terrible decision. My best friend Marcus and I decided to explore the one place in town everyone talked about but nobody went near. An abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts. It sat alone in the middle of a massive stretch of land, nearly 200 acres of empty fields, like it had been dropped there and forgotten by time itself. Nobody owned it anymore. The original family had died decades before we were born. The county had taken the property but never developed it, never sold it, never even cleaned it up. They just fenced it off and posted warning signs everywhere. State property, no trespassing. And that was it. Whenever you drove past on the country roads, you could see the farmhouse in the distance gray, collapsing, slowly rotting under years of weather, windows broken, roof sagging, paint stripped away until it looked more like a skeleton than a house. It didn't look haunted in the dramatic movie sense. It looked abandoned in a way that felt permanent, like nothing had lived there for a very long time. People in town told stories, of course. Strange lights, figures in the windows, animals refusing to go near the fence. Most of it sounded exaggerated small-town myths created just to make things interesting. Marcus and I didn't believe any of it. We weren't looking for trouble. We weren't vandals. We were just bored teenagers chasing something different. So one night, armed with nothing but 2 flashlights and way too much confidence, we drove to the edge of town in Marcus's car. We parked off the road where it wouldn't be easily seen. Then we started walking. The farmhouse was about a mile out across open land, past the fence line. The ground was uneven, covered in tall grass that brushed against our legs as we moved, whispering with every step. We kept our lights low. Not because of ghosts, but because we knew police patrols sometimes passed through the area. Getting caught trespassing on state property would have meant serious trouble. Out there, away from town lights, the darkness felt heavier. The stars were bright, but they didn't help much on the ground. The farmhouse grew larger with every step, slowly transforming from a distant silhouette into a looming shape against the night sky. And the closer we got, the less it looked like an empty building, and more like something watching us approach. Instead of walking straight across the wide, exposed field toward the house, we stuck to the fence line, circling around until we reached the back, where the land met a dense patch of woods. That way, we'd only be out in the open for a minute or two, not long enough for passing headlights to spot us. At least, that was the plan. Up close, the farmhouse looked completely different from how it had from the road all those years. Worse. The wooden siding had rotted into a dark, almost black color, stripped of any paint or life. Thick vines crawled up the walls like veins, disappearing into broken window frames. Tall weeds choked the base of the house, as if nature had been slowly reclaiming it piece by piece. And yet, it was still standing. No collapsed roof, no missing walls. Just an empty structure stubbornly refusing to fall apart. That alone felt strange. Most abandoned places that old were half gone by now. We hurried along the side of the house, staying low beneath the windows. Neither of us even bothered checking the front door. We assumed it would be locked. And neither of us wanted to be seen standing on a porch like idiots. Around the back, we found what we were looking for. An open window. The frame was splintered, the glass long gone, leaving a dark rectangular hole into the house's interior. I climbed in first, carefully swinging my legs through and landing inside with a soft thud on the dusty floor. Then I turned and helped Marcus through. For a moment, we just stood there by the window, not moving. Our flashlight beams cut through the darkness, illuminating thick clouds of dust, drifting through the air, like slow-moving smoke. Every tiny particle shimmered as it passed through the light. And inside, it was completely silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that feels unnatural, like sound itself doesn't belong there. After a few seconds, we started moving deeper into the house. The floorboards held our weight, but they groaned with every step, bending slightly under our feet. Each creak sounded far too loud, echoing through the empty rooms. Marcus and I kept glancing at each other without speaking. We both felt it, that heavy, sinking unease you get when your brain starts warning you that something isn't right, even if you don't know why. Still, neither of us wanted to be the one to say it out loud. We explored for a couple of minutes in tense silence, until Marcus suddenly stopped. "Sam, come here," he whispered. His voice sounded tight, uneasy. "What is that?" He pointed upward. I tilted my flashlight toward the ceiling and froze. Between the floorboards above us, thin cracks ran through the old wood, and from those cracks, a faint orange glow seeped downward, not bright, not flickering like a flashlight, just a dim, steady light, bleeding through the gaps like something glowing in the room above us. The glow above didn't really illuminate much. It barely cast any light at all. You could only see it clearly if you stood directly beneath it. Marcus and I froze, our hearts hammering in our chests. Curiosity mixed with dread. How could there possibly be a light here after all these years? Every logical part of me screamed to turn around and leave immediately. But we didn't. Slowly, cautiously, we crept up the stairs, each step creaking under our weight, like the house itself was groaning at our intrusion. At the top, we found a narrow hallway lined with closed doors, probably bedrooms. Everything was silent, too silent, and then we noticed it. A brighter orange glow flickered beneath one of the doors. Steady, hypnotic, almost unnatural. It should have been our sign to leave. We should have turned around and run. But neither of us moved. The silence drew us in. The kind of silence that makes every sound you make feel like a scream. The kind of silence that convinces your brain something is watching and waiting. I crept closer, holding my flashlight low, and pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. Not a whisper. Not a breath. Not even the shifting of floorboards above us. I swallowed hard and slowly turned the handle. The door protested with a long, echoing creak, the sound bouncing through the house like a warning. And then I saw them. A group of people, kneeling in a tight circle. I couldn't make out faces clearly. The room was barely lit by a few candles scattered around them. Maybe 3 men, maybe more. Their forms huddled together like they were performing some ritual, their movements frozen, silent. Even when Marcus and I stepped inside 5 minutes earlier, the moment we'd been wandering around, they hadn't moved. They didn't react. Not a twitch, not a glance. It was like they were suspended in time, or trapped in some kind of trance. The air itself felt heavy, thick, suffocating. My chest tightened, my stomach flipped. Something about them, about the way the light reflected off the edges of the circle, felt wrong on a level deeper than fear. Dot. It wasn't just that we were intruding, Dot. It was that we weren't supposed to see this. And somehow, the house, and whatever lived here, knew we were watching. I only stared at them for a few seconds, maybe 3, before Marcus grabbed my arm and yanked me back. We didn't just run. We scrambled down the stairs, trying to be quiet, even though our hearts were pounding in our ears. Every creak of the floorboards, every breath, every shift of our weight felt deafening, like the house itself was amplifying our panic. When we reached the window, Marcus climbed out first. As I swung my legs through, I heard it. Heavy thuds, multiple footsteps pounding from the room above, thundering down the stairs. I didn't wait to see what was coming. I dove out the window, landing hard on the overgrown grass, scraping my hands and knees, adrenaline driving me faster than I've ever moved. We didn't stop. We barreled through the woods, branches whipping our faces, roots threatening to trip us at every step. Eventually, we slowed just enough to catch our breath, and then a loud thud echoed from the direction of the farmhouse. Probably the open window slamming shut behind us, we told ourselves. Probably nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. The walk back home was miserable. Our heads throbbed from tension and fear. Neither of us could make sense of what we had just seen. We didn't talk about it much after that. A few days later, the incident had practically disappeared from our conversations, probably because admitting it out loud made it feel more real. Years later, after high school, I moved away for college. The farmhouse? Gone. Like it had never existed at all. I still don't know what we saw that night, what those figures were, why the house even let us in. All I know is that it was, without a doubt, the most horrifying experience of my life, and I don't think I'll ever forget it.